The colony of New Haven orbited a distant star at the edge of an uncharted galaxy. It was a place where humans and aliens mingled, where trade ships docked daily, and where the air buzzed with the hum of activity. The colony's main hub known as the Central Plaza was always crowded. Traders shouted prices for exotic goods, refugees searched for shelter, and soldiers patrolled the area, ensuring order in a chaotic world. Among these soldiers was Daniel Harper, a man whose name was whispered with both admiration and fear. Daniel had just returned from a mission that had pushed him to his limits. His body ached from weeks of combat, and his mind was heavy with memories he wished he could forget. He walked through the plaza, his boots clicking against the metallic floor, his uniform stained with dirt and sweat. People stepped aside as he passed, sensing the weight of his presence. Despite his exhaustion, Daniel carried himself with the discipline of someone who had spent years training for war. His piercing blue eyes scanned the crowd, alert for any sign of trouble. But trouble found him instead. In the middle of the plaza stood Emma Lewis, a journalist known for her sharp tongue and relentless pursuit of the truth. She was small in stature, but radiated confidence. Her dark hair was tied back, and her notebook was clutched tightly in her hand. When she spotted Daniel, her eyes narrowed and she marched toward him without hesitation. "Harper!" she called out, her voice cutting through the noise of the bustling crowd. "I've been looking for you." Daniel stopped and turned to face her. He recognized her immediately. Emma had been following him for weeks, asking questions about his missions, his superiors, and the decisions made by the United Earth Alliance. She was persistent, and though he respected her dedication, he had no patience for her accusations. "What do you want, Lewis?" he asked, his tone flat and emotionless. Emma didn't flinch. She stepped closer, her notebook raised like a weapon. "I want answers," she said. "People are dying because of your silence. You know what's happening out there. Experiments, cover-ups, atrocities committed in the name of progress. And you're letting it happen." The crowd around them began to grow quiet. Conversations paused as people turned to watch the confrontation. Some recognized Emma as the journalist who had been stirring up controversy, while others knew Daniel as a hero of the Alliance. The tension between them was palpable. "I don't answer to you," Daniel replied, his voice low but firm. "You don't understand what's at stake." "That's exactly my point," Emma shot back. "No one understands because you and your precious alliance keep everything hidden. How many lives have been destroyed because of your lies?" Her words struck a nerve. Daniel clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. He wanted to walk away, to ignore her accusations, but something in her voice stopped him. She wasn't just angry. She was desperate. Desperate for the truth. Before Daniel could respond, another voice interrupted the exchange. "Enough of this nonsense." Everyone turned to see Kyle Monroe pushing his way through the crowd. Kyle was tall and broad-shouldered, with a swagger that irritated those around him. He was also a soldier, though not nearly as decorated as Daniel. Where Daniel was disciplined and reserved, Kyle was reckless and arrogant. He had always resented Daniel, envying the respect and recognition he received from their superiors. Stepped between Daniel and Emma, sneering at the journalist. "You should know your place, girl," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "This isn't your business," Emma glared at him. "My business is exposing the truth. Something you wouldn't know anything about." Kyle's face darkened. He took a step closer to her, towering over her smaller frame. "Watch your mouth," he growled. Emma didn't back down. She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze with defiance. "Or what? You'll hit me?" The plaza fell silent. All eyes were on Kyle now, waiting to see how he would respond. For a moment, it seemed like he might let it go. But then, without warning, he raised his hand and slapped her across the face. The sound echoed through the plaza, sharp and sudden. Emma staggered back, her hand flying to her cheek. Her notebook fell to the ground, its pages scattering. The crowd gasped, some stepping back in shock, others murmuring angrily. Daniel froze, his mind racing. He hadn't expected this. No one had. But before anyone could react, something inside him snapped. In an instant, Daniel moved. He grabbed Kyle by the collar, yanking him forward with surprising speed and strength. Kyle barely had time to register what was happening before Daniel's fist connected with his face. The first punch stunned him, sending him reeling. The second shattered his jaw, blood spraying onto the floor. And the third knocked him unconscious, his body crumpling to the ground like a broken doll. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of machinery and the distant murmur of voices beyond the plaza. Then, slowly, the crowd erupted into chaos. Some cheered, applauding Daniel's actions. Others shouted in outrage, demanding justice for Kyle. Security. Officers rushed to the scene, their weapons drawn. Daniel stood over Kyle's prone form, his chest heaving with exertion. His knuckles were bruised, and his face was unreadable. "No one touches her," he said, his voice cold and steady. It was a simple statement, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. As the security officers surrounded him, Daniel didn't resist. He allowed them to take him into custody, his expression blank. Emma watched from a distance, her cheek still red from the slap. She didn't know whether to thank Daniel or fear him. All she knew was that nothing would ever be the same again. The plaza slowly returned to normal, but the memory of what had happened lingered in the air. Rumors spread quickly, painting Daniel as either a hero or a monster. For Emma, the incident was more than just a story, it was personal. As she picked up her scattered notes, she couldn't shake the image of Daniel standing over Kyle, his fists clenched and his eyes blazing with fury. Little did she know, this was only the beginning. The colony of New Haven orbited a distant star at the edge of an uncharted galaxy. It was a place where humans and aliens mingled, where trade ships docked daily, and where the air buzzed with the hum of activity. The colony's main hub, known as the Central Plaza, was always crowded. Traders shouted prices for exotic goods, refugees searched for shelter, and soldiers patrolled the area, ensuring order in a chaotic world. Among these soldiers was Daniel Harper, a man whose name was whispered with both admiration and fear. Daniel had just returned from a mission that had pushed him to his limits. His body ached from weeks of combat, and his mind was heavy with memories he wished he could forget. He walked through the plaza, his boots clicking against the metallic floor, his uniform stained with dirt and sweat. People stepped aside as he passed, sensing the weight of his presence. Despite his exhaustion, Daniel carried himself with the discipline of someone who had spent years training for war. His piercing blue eyes scanned the crowd, alert for any sign of trouble. But trouble found him instead. In the middle of the plaza stood Emma Lewis, a journalist known for her sharp tongue and relentless pursuit of the truth. She was small in stature, but radiated confidence. Her dark hair was tied back, and her notebook was clutched tightly in her hand. When she spotted Daniel, her eyes narrowed and she marched toward him without hesitation. "Harper!" she called out, her voice cutting through the noise of the bustling crowd. "I've been looking for you." Daniel stopped and turned to face her. He recognized her immediately. Emma had been following him for weeks, asking questions about his missions, his superiors, and the decisions made by the United Earth Alliance. She was persistent, and though he respected her dedication, he had no patience for her accusations. "What do you want, Lewis?" he asked, his tone flat and emotionless. Emma didn't flinch. She stepped closer, her notebook raised like a weapon. "I want answers," she said. "People are dying because of your silence. You know what's happening out there. Experiments, cover-ups, atrocities committed in the name of progress. And you're letting it happen." The crowd around them began to grow quiet. Conversations paused as people turned to watch the confrontation. Some recognized Emma as the journalist who had been stirring up controversy, while others knew Daniel as a hero of the Alliance. The tension between them was palpable. "I don't answer to you," Daniel replied, his voice low but firm. "You don't understand what's at stake." "That's exactly my point," Emma shot back. "No one understands because you and your precious Alliance keep everything hidden. How many lives have been destroyed because of your lies?" Her words struck a nerve. Daniel clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. He wanted to walk away, to ignore her accusations, but something in her voice stopped him. She wasn't just angry. She was desperate. Desperate for the truth. Before Daniel could respond, another voice interrupted the exchange. "Enough of this nonsense." Everyone turned to see Kyle Monroe pushing his way through the crowd. Kyle was tall and broad-shouldered, with a swagger that irritated those around him. He was also a soldier, though not nearly as decorated as Daniel. Where Daniel was disciplined and reserved, Kyle was reckless and arrogant. He had always resented Daniel, envying the respect and recognition he received from their superiors. Stepped between Daniel and Emma, sneering at the journalist. "You should know your place, girl," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "This isn't your business," Emma glared at him. "My business is exposing the truth. Something you wouldn't know anything about." Kyle's face darkened. He took a step closer to her, towering over her smaller frame. "Watch your mouth," he growled. Emma didn't back down. She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze with defiance. "Or what? You'll hit me?" The plaza fell silent. All eyes were on Kyle now, waiting to see how he would respond. For a moment, it seemed like he might let it go. But then, without warning, he raised his hand and slapped her across the face. The sound echoed through the plaza, sharp and sudden. Emma staggered back, her hand flying to her cheek. Her notebook fell to the ground, its pages scattering. The crowd gasped, some stepping back in shock, others murmuring angrily. Daniel froze, his mind racing. He hadn't expected this. No one had. But before anyone could react, something inside him snapped. In an instant, Daniel moved. He grabbed Kyle by the collar, yanking him forward with surprising speed and strength. Kyle barely had time to register what was happening before Daniel's fist connected with his face. The first punch stunned him, sending him reeling. The second shattered his jaw, blood spraying onto the floor. And the third knocked him unconscious, his body crumpling to the ground like a broken doll. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of machinery and the distant murmur of voices beyond the plaza. Then, slowly, the crowd erupted into chaos. Some cheered, applauding Daniel's actions. Others shouted in outrage, demanding justice for Kyle. Security. Officers rushed to the scene, their weapons drawn. Daniel stood over Kyle's prone form, his chest heaving with exertion. His knuckles were bruised, and his face was unreadable. "No one touches her," he said, his voice cold and steady. It was a simple statement, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. As the security officers surrounded him, Daniel didn't resist. He allowed them to take him into custody, his expression blank. Emma watched from a distance, her cheek still red from the slap. She didn't know whether to thank Daniel or fear him. All she knew was that nothing would ever be the same again. The plaza slowly returned to normal, but the memory of what had happened lingered in the air. Rumors spread quickly, painting Daniel as either a hero or a monster. For Emma, the incident was more than just a story, it was personal. As she picked up her scattered notes, she couldn't shake the image of Daniel standing over Kyle, his fists clenched and his eyes blazing with fury. Little did she know, this was only the beginning. The days that followed the incident in the plaza were long and tense. Daniel Harper remained in custody, his fate undecided as Captain Lavra Bennett and other high-ranking officers debated what to do with him. The colony buzzed with talk of the fight. Some people called Daniel a hero for standing up to Kyle Monroe, while others labeled him dangerous and unpredictable. For Daniel, locked away in his cell, it felt like the world was spinning out of control, even though he tried to keep his emotions in check. Inside the detention center, time seemed to move slower. Daniel spent most of his hours sitting on the narrow cot in his cell, staring at the blank walls or pacing back and forth. He wasn't used to being idle. His entire life had been about action, following orders, completing missions, surviving against all odds. Now, trapped in this small space, he couldn't shake the feeling of restlessness that gnawed at him. But more than that, he couldn't stop thinking about Emma Lewis. Her face kept appearing in his mind, the way she had stood there, unflinching, even after Kyle hit her. She hadn't cried or begged for help. Instead, she had faced the situation head-on, just like she always did when chasing a story. Daniel admired that about her, though he would never admit it aloud. He also couldn't forget the look in her eyes when she visited him in the detention center. There was gratitude there, but also curiosity, as if she was trying to piece together who he really was beneath the uniform. Emma, meanwhile, was struggling with her own thoughts. Since the confrontation, she had thrown herself into her work, determined to uncover more about the corruption she believed was poisoning the United Earth Alliance. But no matter how hard she tried to focus, her mind kept drifting back to Daniel. She couldn't understand why someone so disciplined and controlled would risk everything to defend her. It didn't make sense. Or maybe it did, and she just couldn't see it yet. One evening, as she sat alone in her small apartment, Emma decided to dig deeper into Daniel's past. She pulled up old records and news articles on her computer, searching for anything that might shed light on the man behind the soldier. What she found surprised her. Daniel Harper had grown up on a remote farming colony, far from the bustling cities and advanced technology of New Haven. His parents had been kind but strict, teaching him the value of hard work and loyalty. He was 16. Marauders attacked their settlement, killing everyone in sight. Daniel had managed to escape, but not before witnessing the brutal deaths of his family. After that, he joined the military, hoping to find purpose and justice in a world that often seemed cruel and unfair. As Emma read through the details of his early life, she began to understand him a little better. The loss of his family must have left deep scars, shaping the person he became. She could see now why he valued discipline and order. It gave him a sense of control in a chaotic universe. And perhaps, she thought, his violent reaction to Kyle hitting her wasn't just about defending her. It was also about protecting something he saw as sacred, respect for human dignity. But there was another side to Daniel's story, one that troubled Emma. Over the years, he had earned a reputation for being ruthless in combat, willing to do whatever it took to complete his missions. Some reports hinted at questionable tactics, even rumors of civilian casualties during certain operations. These stories painted a darker picture of Daniel, one that clashed with the image of the man who had defended her in the plaza. Emma knew she needed to confront him about it. If she wanted to truly understand him, and if she hoped to expose the truth about the Alliance, she had to get closer to him. So the next day, she returned to the detention center, armed with questions and determination. When Daniel saw her again, he didn't seem surprised. He nodded toward the chair across from him, inviting her to sit. "Back already?" he asked, his tone neutral. "I have more questions," Emma said, pulling out her notebook. "About you." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "What do you want to know?" "Everything," she replied. "Who you are, where you came from, why you joined the military. I think it's important." Daniel sighed, leaning back in his chair. He didn't like talking about himself, especially not to reporters. But something about Emma's persistence and the genuine interest in her voice made him hesitate. Maybe telling her his story would help her understand why he acted the Way he did that, so he began to speak, starting with the attack on his colony and the loss of his family. As he talked, his voice remained steady, almost detached, as if he were recounting someone else's life rather than his own. He described his decision to join the military, his rise through the ranks, and the toll it had taken on him over the years. He didn't shy away from the difficult parts, the missions that haunted him, the choices he regretted, the moments when he questioned whether he was doing the right thing. Emma listened intently, scribbling notes in her notebook. She didn't interrupt him once, sensing that he needed to tell his story without judgment. By the time he finished, she felt like she finally understood him, or at least understood a part of him. "You've been carrying a lot of pain," she said softly. "For a long time," Daniel shrugged. "It's not about the pain," he said. "It's about what you do with it. I chose to fight. To protect people. That's all." Emma nodded, though she wasn't entirely convinced. She still had doubts about some of the things he had done, but she respected his honesty. "Do you ever wonder if it's worth it?" she asked. "All the sacrifices, all the lives lost?" "All the time," Daniel admitted. "But then I remind myself why I started. My family didn't deserve what happened to them. Neither did anyone else." His words lingered in the air between them. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Emma leaned forward, her expression serious. "I need your help," she said. Daniel frowned. "With what?" "There's something bigger going on," Emma explained. "Something I've been investigating for months. Illegal experiments, cover-ups, atrocities committed by the Alliance. I think you know more about it than you're letting on." Daniel stiffened, his guard going up immediately. "You don't know what you're asking," he said. "Yes, I do," Emma insisted. "I know it's dangerous. But if we don't expose the truth, nothing will change. People will keep dying, and no one will care." Daniel looked away, his jaw tightening. He knew she was right. He had suspected for years that the Alliance was hiding things, but he had chosen to ignore it, telling himself it wasn't his place to question authority. Now sitting here with Emma, he realized he couldn't keep looking the other way. Not anymore. "What do you need me to do?" he asked finally. Emma smiled, relief washing over her. "I need access to classified files," she said. "And I can't get them without someone on the inside." "Someone like you," Daniel nodded slowly, weighing the risks. Helping Emma meant betraying the very organization he had sworn to serve. It could cost him everything: his career, his freedom, maybe even his life. But as he looked at her, he knew he couldn't say no. Not this time. "All right," he said. "I'll help you." From that moment on, their fates were intertwined. Together, they began planning how to infiltrate the Alliance's secure systems and gather the evidence Emma needed. It wouldn't be easy, and they both knew the stakes were dangerously high. But neither of them was willing to back down. As they worked, Daniel found himself opening up to Emma in ways he never had with anyone else. She listened to him without judgment, offering support when he needed it most. In return, he shared insights and information that helped her navigate the complex web of lies and secrets surrounding the Alliance. Slowly but surely they built a fragile trust, a bond forged in the heat of shared purpose. Outside the detention center, tensions continued to rise. Rumors spread that Daniel would soon be released, sparking heated debates among the colonists. Some argued that he should be punished for attacking Kyle Monroe, while others believed he deserved leniency given the circumstances. Meanwhile, Kyle himself had recovered from his injuries and was quietly plotting his revenge, vowing to make Daniel pay for humiliating him in front of everyone. Despite the growing chaos, Daniel and Emma remained focused on their mission. They knew the road ahead would be fraught with danger, but they also knew they couldn't turn back now. The truth was too important, and the cost of silence was too great. As the days passed, Daniel began to feel a strange sense of clarity. For years he had followed orders without question, believing that loyalty to the Alliance was enough. Now, working alongside Emma, he realized that true justice required more than blind obedience. It required courage, sacrifice, and a willingness to challenge the status quo, even if it meant putting everything on the line. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel Harper felt like he was fighting for something real, something worth fighting for. The plan was simple, but risky. Emma and Daniel knew they couldn't just walk into the classified facility where the Alliance conducted its experiments. They needed a strategy, something clever, something no one would expect. For days they pored over blueprints, security schedules, and access codes stolen from low-level employees. Every detail mattered. One mistake could mean capture or worse. Daniel insisted on going in alone at first. "It's too dangerous for you," he said, his voice firm. "If anything goes wrong, I don't want you caught in the middle." Emma shook her head, refusing to back down. "I'm not letting you do this by yourself," she said. "This is my story, my fight. I'm coming with you." Daniel wanted to argue, but he knew it was pointless. Emma had a stubborn streak that matched his own, and once she set her mind on something, there was no changing it. Besides, he had to admit she was useful. Her quick thinking and resourcefulness had already saved them more than once during their preparations. Reluctantly, he agreed to let her join him, but only if she promised to follow his lead. The night of the mission arrived quicker than either of them expected. Dressed in black tactical gear and armed with stolen weapons, they slipped out of the colony under the cover of darkness. The facility was located on the outskirts of New Haven, hidden deep within a rocky canyon. Its exterior was unassuming, a series of bland concrete buildings surrounded by high walls and surveillance drones. But inside, it housed some of the most dangerous secrets of the Alliance. As they approached the perimeter, Daniel scanned the area carefully. "Stay low," he whispered, "and keep your eyes open." Emma nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never done anything like this before. Reporting on corruption was one thing. Breaking into a top-secret military base was another. Entirely, but she forced herself to focus, reminding herself why they were here. This wasn't just about exposing the truth. It was about stopping the atrocities that had gone unchecked for far too long. They moved silently through the shadows, avoiding the bright beams of searchlights and the patrols of armed guards. When they reached the main gate, Daniel pulled out a small device he had rigged earlier. It looked crude, pieced together from spare parts, but it worked perfectly. Within seconds, the lock clicked open, and they slipped inside. The interior of the facility was eerily quiet. Long corridors stretched in every direction, lined with doors marked with cryptic symbols and warning signs. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the walls. The air smelled sterile, almost clinical, making Emma's skin crawl. Something about this place felt wrong, not just because of what they were looking for, but because of the oppressive silence that seemed to press down on them. "Which way?" Emma whispered, glancing at the map on her datapad. "This way," Daniel replied, pointing down a corridor to their left. He led the way, his footsteps light and deliberate. Every few steps, he paused to check for cameras or motion sensors. Emma followed closely behind, clutching a small recorder in one hand and a flashlight in the other. They soon found themselves in a large laboratory filled with strange equipment. Glass tanks lined the walls, each containing grotesque forms suspended in greenish liquid. Some of the creatures looked almost human, while others were twisted hybrids of man and machine. Emma gasped as she realized what she was seeing: failed experiments, abandoned creations that had been deemed unworthy by their creators. What is this?" she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Proof," Daniel said grimly. "Proof of what they've been doing." Emma quickly began recording everything: the tanks, the notes scattered across tables, eerie glow of monitors displaying incomprehensible data. She tried to stay calm, but her hands trembled as she worked. These weren't just experiments. These were lives ruined and discarded without a second thought. As they moved deeper into the facility, they discovered more evidence of the Alliance's crimes. Logs detailing unethical procedures, recordings of coerced confessions, plans for deploying biological weapons against civilian populations. All of it pointed to a conspiracy far greater than Emma had imagined. Her stomach churned with disgust, but she forced herself to keep going. They needed proof, undeniable proof, to expose the truth. But their luck didn't last. As they entered another room, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. Red lights flashed, bathing the corridors in an ominous glow. Someone had triggered the security system. "Move!" Daniel shouted, grabbing Emma's arm and pulling her toward the nearest exit. They ran as fast as they could, dodging guards who appeared seemingly out of nowhere. Shots rang out, ricocheting off the walls around them. Daniel fired back, his aim precise and deadly. He took down 2 guards with ease, but more kept coming. "We're not going to make it," Emma yelled, panic rising in her voice. "Yes, we are," Daniel snapped. "Just keep running." They burst through a heavy metal door and found themselves in a storage area filled with crates and machinery. Daniel quickly scanned the room, searching for another way out. Spotting a ventilation shaft near the ceiling, he gestured for Emma to climb up. "I'll cover you," he said, handing her the recorder. "Go." Emma hesitated for a moment, then scrambled onto a nearby crate and hoisted herself into the shaft. It was narrow and cramped, but she crawled forward as fast as she could, clutching the recorder tightly. Behind her, she heard gunfire and shouts as Daniel fought off the guards. She wanted to turn back to help him, but she knew she couldn't. Not now. After what felt like hours, Emma finally emerged from the ventilation shaft onto the roof of the facility. She dropped to the ground, gasping for breath, and looked around frantically for Daniel. Moments later, he appeared, bloodied but alive, dragging a guard's unconscious body behind him. "That way," he said, pointing toward a cluster of trees. "In the distance, we need to disappear." They ran through the wilderness, putting as much distance between themselves and the facility as possible. Only when they reached a safe hiding spot did they stop to catch their breath. Emma collapsed onto the ground, her body trembling with exhaustion. Daniel knelt beside her, checking her for injuries. "You okay?" he asked, his voice softer now. Emma nodded, though tears welled up in her eyes. "Yeah," she whispered. "But I don't think I'll ever forget what we saw back there." Daniel didn't respond. He stared off into the distance, his expression unreadable. He had seen horrors before, things that would haunt him for the rest of his life. But this was different. This was evil on a scale he hadn't anticipated. For a while, neither of them spoke. They simply sat there, listening to the sounds of the night, the rustling of leaves, the distant call of animals, the steady rhythm of their breathing. Slowly, the adrenaline faded, leaving behind a hollow emptiness. "We have what we need," Emma said finally, holding up the recorder. "Now we just need to get it out there." Daniel nodded. "Easier said than done. They'll be looking for U.S. "I know," Emma replied, "but we can't give up now. Not after everything we've been through." Daniel studied her face, noting the determination in her eyes. She was scared, yes, but she wasn't backing down. He admired that about her. In many ways, she reminded him of himself, stubborn, relentless, unwilling to accept defeat. "All right," he said, "let's finish this." Over the next few days, they laid low, moving from one hiding spot to another to avoid detection. Emma worked tirelessly to compile the evidence they had gathered, organizing it into a coherent report that could be shared with the public. Daniel kept watch, always alert for signs of pursuit. Together, they formed a team unlike any either of them had ever been part of, one built on trust, shared purpose, and mutual respect. But their journey was far from over. Back at the colony, Tensions continued to rise. Rumors of their escape spread quickly, fueling both fear and hope among the people. Some viewed Daniel and Emma as traitors, criminals who deserved to be punished. Others saw them as heroes, brave individuals willing to risk everything to expose the truth. Kyle Monroe, still nursing his wounds from their earlier encounter, seethed with anger. He blamed Daniel for humiliating him and ruining his reputation. More than anything, he wanted revenge, and he wasn't going to rest until he got it. Meanwhile, Captain Lavra Bennett faced mounting pressure from her superiors to locate the fugitives. Orders came down from the highest levels of command, demanding swift action. But Lavra couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. She had known Daniel for years, trusted him even. Could he really be guilty of treason? Or was there more to the story than anyone realized? As the hunt intensified, Daniel and Emma prepared for the final phase of their mission. They knew the risks. They could be captured, killed, or worse. But they also knew they couldn't turn back now. The truth was too important, and the stakes were too high. For Daniel, this was more than just a mission. It was redemption. A chance to right the wrongs he had ignored for so long, to fight for something real instead of blindly following orders. And for Emma, it was validation. Proof that her work mattered, that speaking out against injustice could make a difference. Together, they stood on the brink of something monumental. Whatever happened next, they were ready. The sun had barely risen when Daniel and Emma reached the edge of a dense forest. They had been on the move for days, constantly shifting locations to avoid detection. Exhaustion clung to them like a second skin, but they couldn't afford to stop. Not yet. Every moment counted. The evidence they carried was too important to lose, and the Alliance would stop at nothing to silence them. Emma opened her datapad, reviewing the files she had compiled from their raid on the facility. Each document, each recording, was a piece of a puzzle that revealed the horrifying truth about the experiments conducted by the United Earth Alliance. She felt a mix of dread and determination as she scrolled through the images. Twisted creatures suspended in tanks, logs detailing unethical procedures, and plans for weapons designed to target civilians. This wasn't just corruption. It was evil, plain and simple. "We need to get this information to someone who can broadcast it," Emma said, looking up at Daniel. "Someone trustworthy." Daniel nodded, his expression grim. "Easier said than done. Everyone's either scared or bought off. We'll have to be careful." They decided to head toward an old communications outpost located deep in the forest. It was abandoned, but its equipment might still work if they could power it up. From there, they could transmit the evidence to multiple news outlets across the galaxy, ensuring it reached as many people as possible. As they trekked through the woods, the air grew colder, and the trees closed in around them. Shadows danced across the ground, cast by the early morning light filtering through the canopy above. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the crunch of leaves beneath their boots and the occasional call of a distant bird. Both of them were alert, scanning their surroundings for any sign of danger. Suddenly, Daniel stopped, raising a hand to signal Emma to do the same. He crouched low, his eyes narrowing as he listened intently. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. Emma froze, straining her ears. At first, she didn't hear anything. Then, faintly came the sound of footsteps, several pairs, moving quickly and deliberately. Someone was following them. "Stay close," Daniel murmured, pulling out his weapon. He glanced around, searching for cover, spotting a cluster of boulders. Nearby, he motioned for Emma to follow him. They ducked behind the rocks just as a group of soldiers emerged from the trees. It was Kyle Monroe, leading a squad of heavily armed men. His face was bruised and swollen from their earlier encounter, but his eyes burned with hatred. He scanned the area, clearly expecting to find them. "They can't have gone far," Kyle growled, gripping his rifle tightly. "Spread out and find them." Emma's heart raced as she pressed herself against the cold stone, trying to make herself as small as possible. Beside her, Daniel remained calm, his breathing steady. He leaned closer to her, his voice barely audible. "When I say go, run straight for those trees over there. Don't look back." Emma nodded, though fear threatened to overwhelm her. She trusted Daniel, but the odds were stacked against them. There were too many soldiers, and they were outnumbered and exhausted. Kyle's voice cut through the tension. "Harper, I know you're out here. Come out, and maybe I'll let your little girlfriend live." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Instead, he waited, watching the soldiers fan out. When one of them moved closer to their position, Daniel saw his chance. Now. He hissed. Emma bolted from their hiding spot, sprinting toward the trees as fast as her legs could carry her. Gunfire erupted behind her, bullets whizzing past her head. She didn't dare look back, focusing instead on reaching the safety of the forest. Daniel stayed behind, firing back at the soldiers to give Emma time to escape. His aim was precise, taking down 2 men before the others realized where the shots were coming from. Kyle shouted orders, directing his men to surround Daniel. "Get him!" Kyle roared, charging forward. Daniel fought fiercely, using every ounce of skill he had learned during his years in the military. He dodged bullets, countered attacks, and disarmed one soldier after another. But even he couldn't hold off an entire squad forever. As more soldiers closed in, he knew he had to retreat or risk being captured. He turned and ran, weaving through the trees as gunfire echoed behind him. His lungs burned, and his muscles screamed in protest, but he pushed himself harder than ever before. He had to reach Emma. He couldn't leave her alone. Meanwhile, Emma had reached the communications outpost. The building was old and crumbling, its walls covered in moss and vines. She pushed open the rusted door and stepped inside, coughing as dust filled the air. The room was cluttered with broken equipment and tangled wires, but in the center stood a large console, the communications array. Emma set to work immediately, connecting her data pad to the console. Her hands trembled as she typed commands, trying to restore power to the system. The screen flickered to life, displaying lines of code and error messages. She cursed under her breath, working faster. Time was running out. Outside, Daniel finally caught up to her. He burst into the outpost, bloodied and breathless, but alive. "We don't have much time," he said urgently. "They're right behind me." Emma didn't look up. "Almost there," she muttered, her fingers flying over the keyboard. Just a few more seconds. The sound of approaching footsteps made Daniel turn toward the door. He raised his weapon, ready to defend them, but then something unexpected happened. The screen on the console lit up fully, and Emma let out a triumphant cry. "I did it!" she exclaimed. "The transmission is live." Daniel allowed himself a brief moment of relief as the evidence began streaming out to news networks across the galaxy. But the celebration was short-lived. The door burst open, and Kyle stormed in, his weapon trained on them. "Stop the transmission!" Kyle snarled, advancing toward Emma. Daniel stepped in front of her, shielding her with his body. "You're too late," he said, his voice cold. "The truth is already out there." Kyle's face twisted with rage. "I don't care about your stupid crusade," he spat. "This is personal. You humiliated me, Harper, and now you're going to pay." Before anyone could react, Kyle lunged at Daniel, tackling him to the ground. The 2 men grappled fiercely, exchanging blows in a brutal struggle. Emma backed away, clutching the recorder tightly, unsure of what to do. Daniel managed to throw Kyle off balance, pinning him to the floor. He grabbed a piece of debris, a sharp shard of metal, and pressed it against Kyle's throat. "Tell me why," Daniel demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "Why are you so loyal to them? What has the Alliance promised you?" Kyle sneered, refusing to answer. but his silence spoke volumes. Daniel saw the greed in his eyes, the desperation to climb the ranks no matter the cost. It sickened him. "You're pathetic," Daniel said, standing up and kicking Kyle's weapon. "Out of reach. If you want to fight, do it for something real. Not for power or pride." Kyle scrambled to his feet, glaring at Daniel with pure hatred. But before he could make another move, the sound of approaching vehicles echoed outside. Reinforcements had arrived, Alliance troops sent to capture Daniel and Emma. "We need to go," Emma urged, tugging on Daniel's arm. "Now." Daniel hesitated for a split second, then nodded. Together, they slipped out the back door of the outpost, disappearing into the forest once again. Behind them, Kyle shouted orders, rallying his men to pursue them. The chase resumed, but this time Daniel and Emma had the advantage. The transmission had been successful, and the truth was spreading like wildfire. People were waking up to the horrors committed by the Alliance, and protests were already erupting across the colonies. The tide was turning, despite the chaos. Daniel felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time in years, he wasn't fighting for orders or loyalty. He was fighting for justice for all the lives destroyed by lies and greed. And beside him, Emma shared that purpose. Their bond had grown stronger with each challenge they faced, forged in the fires of adversity. As they ran deeper into the forest, Daniel glanced at Emma. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft. She smiled faintly, though her eyes were filled with determination. "Yeah," she replied. "Let's finish this." And with that, they disappeared into the trees, ready to face whatever came next. The forest stretched endlessly, its shadows growing longer as the sun dipped below the horizon. Daniel and Emma pushed forward, their bodies weary but their spirits unbroken. The sounds of pursuit had faded for now, but they knew it was only a matter of time before the Alliance caught up to them. Every step they took felt heavier than the last, but neither of them dared to slow down. Emma's mind raced as she clutched the recorder tightly in her hand. She thought about the transmission they had set out, images of twisted experiments, logs detailing atrocities, plans for weapons designed to destroy civilian populations. It was horrifying, but it was also undeniable proof of the Alliance's crimes. She wondered how people would react when they saw it. Would they rise up? Would they demand change? Or would fear keep them silent? Daniel seemed to sense her unease. "It's done," he said quietly, his voice cutting through the silence. "Whatever happens next, we've done our part." Emma nodded, though doubt lingered in her chest. "Do you think it'll be enough?" she asked. "Enough to stop them?" "It has to be," Daniel replied. "We can't control how people respond. All we can do is show them the truth." His words offered little comfort, but Emma appreciated the honesty. They had risked everything to expose the corruption within the Alliance, and now the rest was out of their hands. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that their journey wasn't over, not yet. As night fell, they found shelter in a small cave hidden among the rocks. The air inside was cool and damp, but it provided some protection from the elements. Emma collapsed onto the ground, her body aching from days of running and hiding. Daniel stood at the entrance, keeping watch as the darkness enveloped the forest. "We should rest," he said after a while, turning to face her. "We won't get another chance." Emma hesitated. "What if they find us?" "They won't," Daniel assured her. "Not tonight." She wanted to believe him, but the fear of capture gnawed at her. Closing her eyes, she tried to focus on the rhythm of her breathing, forcing herself to relax. Sleep came slowly, broken by dreams of tanks filled with grotesque creatures and the sound of alarms blaring in the distance. When morning arrived, the world outside the cave was eerily quiet. Daniel woke first, checking their surroundings carefully before waking Emma. "We need to move," he said, "before they regroup." Emma nodded, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. Her body protested as she stood, but she ignored the pain. "They couldn't afford to waste time. As they continued their journey, signs of unrest began to appear. Smoke rose in the distance, carried by the wind from colonies where protests had turned violent. News feeds crackled to life on abandoned devices. They passed, broadcasting images of angry crowds demanding answers from the Alliance. The evidence they had released was spreading faster than anyone could have anticipated, igniting outrage across the galaxy. But not everyone was pleased. Back at New Haven, Captain Lavra Bennett faced mounting pressure from her superiors. Orders poured in from the highest levels of command, demanding swift action against Daniel and Emma. Yet, as she reviewed the evidence that had been leaked, doubt crept into her mind. What she saw sickened her, things she had never imagined. The Alliance capable of. For the first time, she questioned whether loyalty to her superiors was worth the cost. Kyle Monroe, meanwhile, seethed with anger. His failure to capture Daniel and Emma had cost him dearly, both in reputation and respect. He vowed to hunt them down personally, no matter what it took. But even he couldn't ignore the growing unrest. Soldiers under his command whispered among themselves, questioning the morality of the missions they had been ordered to carry out. The cracks in the Alliance's foundation were beginning to show. For Daniel and Emma, the changing tide offered a glimmer of hope. As they moved through the wilderness, they encountered others who had seen the truth, refugees fleeing colonies overtaken by chaos. Former soldiers disillusioned by the Alliance's lies, ordinary citizens tired of living in fear. Some offered them food or shelter, others simply wished them luck. Each encounter reminded them that they weren't alone in this fight. One evening, as they rested near a stream, Emma turned to Daniel. "What happens after this?" she asked. "If we survive." Daniel paused, considering the question. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've spent so long following orders, doing what I was told. Now, I'm not sure what comes next." Emma smiled faintly. "Maybe you start making your own choices." Daniel looked at her, surprised by the simplicity of her words. In many ways, she was right. This mission had forced him to confront the person he had become, a soldier willing to sacrifice everything for a cause he barely believed in anymore. Maybe it was time to find a new path, one guided by his own principles rather than someone else's agenda. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. Both of them tensed, reaching for their weapons. But instead of soldiers, a group of civilians emerged from the trees. They were armed, but their expressions were friendly. "You're Harper and Lewis, right?" one of them asked. "We've heard about what you've done." Daniel and Emma exchanged wary glances. "Who are you?" Daniel asked cautiously. "We're with the Resistance," the man replied. "People who've had enough of the Alliance's lies. We want to help." Emma stepped forward, curiosity outweighing caution. "How can you help us?" The man gestured toward the forest. "There's a safe zone nearby, a place where people are gathering to figure out what's next. You should come with us." Daniel hesitated, unsure whether to trust them, but something in the man's tone reassured him. These weren't soldiers or spies. They were ordinary people, just like him and Emma, people who wanted change. "All right," Daniel said finally. "Lead the way." The group led them to a hidden camp nestled deep in the woods. Tents dotted the clearing, and makeshift banners bearing messages of defiance hung from the trees. Dozens of people milled about, sharing stories, planning strategies, and preparing for whatever came next. It was a community united by a common goal: to take back their future from those who had stolen it. Emma felt a surge of hope as she looked around. This was more than she had dared to imagine, a movement born from the truth they had fought so hard to reveal. Daniel, too, felt a sense of purpose he hadn't known in years. Here, among these people, he saw a chance to rebuild not just the galaxy, but himself. Over the following days, Daniel and Emma worked alongside the Resistance, helping to organize efforts and spread awareness of the Alliance's crimes. Their story became a symbol of defiance, inspiring others to join the cause. Protests grew larger, louder, and more widespread, putting immense pressure on the Alliance to answer for its actions. In response, the Alliance scrambled to maintain control. High-ranking officials were arrested, records were seized, and investigations were launched. The once unshakable organization began to crumble under the weight of its own corruption. For Daniel, the transformation was profound. He had started this journey as a soldier bound by duty, but he ended it as something more, a leader, a fighter for justice, a man determined to protect the innocent. Emma, too, found fulfillment in the knowledge that her work had made a difference. Together, they had ignited a spark that would burn brightly for years to come. As the resistance gained momentum, Daniel and Emma stood side by side, watching the sunrise paint the sky in hues of gold and crimson. The road ahead would be difficult, fraught with challenges and sacrifices. But for the first time in a long time, they felt hopeful. "You did it," Daniel said softly. Turning to Emma, "You showed the galaxy the truth. We did it." Emma corrected, smiling. "Together." And with that, they turned back toward the camp, ready to face whatever came next together.